G'day. Today I've spent most of today, and for that matter a good portion of yesterday, making up this thing. This is the bracket on the grinder that controls the angle of the point, as well as allows you to adjust for the length of drill bit when you're grinding. For a flat part, it took a bit of work. So I'm going to run through how that's done today. Use of the rotary table, you can file. I actually blended a few things in with the file just to get that final finish. One thing to note too on the drawing, which I'll flash up later, that slot is dimensioned as 5, but it's actually 6. I put a correction on the drawing, but just make a note of that if you're building one of these at home. The next part I want to tackle, the next major part I want to tackle is this one. This is pretty much key to the whole get your angles right thing. And so I'm going to start on this one just so at least I've got it done and I know where it is and all that sort of stuff. It's made out of a bit of 6mm plate, and I've already, I was going to say blued this up, it's actually red. I've already redded this up. I'm going to be doing a lot of marking out. Possibly the most important spot on this part is this one here, which is not actually on the part. It's sitting out there in free space. So what I'm going to do with this is make up or leave a tab on here, or leave a flap of metal, whatever you want to call it, with that location centre popped on. That's what I'm going to use to run these radii and also, curve some of these things. The rest of it could be done, I guess, with an angle grinder or something like that just to dress it up. But I do want these radii smooth and concentric with each other. So I'll leave that there, and that'll probably be one of the last things I take off. I'll get everything else to size and shape, and then once I'm happy with everything, cut that bit off. So I've started marking out my bit of plate. This was cut from a larger piece with a plasma cutter, so I've got dings on this end, or kerf there, but I've squared that up in the mill, actually both sides, so that firstly I've got something to hang on to, but secondly I've got a square corner that I can work to. So it's just a matter of running lines with the height gauge across. When I've got a centre for a circle, I'll put a centre pop, and that helps there. I'm just about to start putting some radii in here, and for those of you who don't do this sort of stuff, one of the tricks there, I need an outside radius of 70. So if I put one end of my dividers on the 10 mark and I take this to 80, that gives me 70. But it's better than trying to find the end of the rule there and think you've got it right, because with most of these steel rules, you can put the end of the divider into the graduation mark, and everything is relatively stable. So anyway, I'll continue doing this until I get this completely marked out. I don't know how well this is all going to show up, but we'll try. So I've got points in there for the start and finish of my two arcs. I've got my slot there. I've got some points here offset, because that's how I'm going to form the radii in there, in this case a 6mm drill. There's my datum point. I'm going to leave that on a little tab there until I can't possibly live without it. Live with it. What else is there to note here? Oh, I'm a little bit short here. I cut my material a bit too meanly, so I'll have to build that up with a little bit of weld. That's not a big problem. Over here I've got a similar issue, but that's just a nick from the plasma cutter, so I may or may not worry about that. We'll see how we go. So and this black texture mark here, or this black mark here, is basically one of the lines skipped a little bit when I was marking it out, and so recover from that. I could either put some more of the red stuff on there, or I just got a texture, put a black mark on there and rescribed, and that gives me my point there. So with these, as I said, I think I'll do that slot before I take this material off. And what I'll also try and do is, or what I will do is put some 6mm holes here and here and here, and that'll give me the inside radii there, and that way when I do come to mill this off, I can just come along and you know, come up to the tangent point of the radius. These external ones, here and here, not quite sure what to do with those. I could put them up on the dividing head and mill them out that way, or I could just do them with an angle grinder. It really depends on you know, how much mucking around you're prepared to put up with. I have my plate clamped directly to the mill table with the slot over one of the T-slots. Originally I was thinking about putting that in the vise, but then I worked out that with the vise pressure here, it was going to firstly tend to close that slot up, but as the slot progressed, I'd probably lose my clamping force anyway, and have the potential of the plate going anywhere. What I've done here is a technique called chain drilling, and back in the days before mills were cheap, that's how people made parts like this. They drilled a whole bunch of holes, and then using a file they would just slowly enlarge those holes and join them up and go from there. One thing with this is that this was done with a 5.5mm drill, and you can't get too much overlap. If you do, the drill tends to want to go into the next hole, and then you've got problems with drills snapping and that sort of thing. So you need to be careful about how closely you get these things together. The important thing is it's a 4mm end mill, and I'm going to use that to clean the slot up, and then slowly one side then the other, just smooth that out, and so I get a nice parallel slot. This is actually quite important. You don't want that so it's lumpy and bumpy, because otherwise the holder won't slide nicely and won't keep the right orientation as it moves forward. Many passes later, there's my slot. That's a 6mm dowel, which is what I'm going to use in there, and that's just a nice fit in there. I haven't deburred that, so once I knock the burrs off the corners, it'll probably be a little bit looser. On to one of the potentially more hazardous parts of doing this. I'm going to rough out the shape with the horizontal bandsaw in its vertical mode. And the reason I say it's potentially hazardous is because you're going to have a large amount of blade sitting there, and for those of you who don't use these in vertical mode very often, remember your push stick. You don't ever want to be in the situation where your hand, arm, whatever is in direct line of the blade, so that if something breaks, snaps, gives way, hits a void, your hand goes into the blade. This is where I'm up to. I've got my centre point there still, so I can do my arcs. I've trimmed away that material with the bandsaw. I had to do some of the shortcuts with a hacksaw, which was I was trying to avoid, but the 1/2-inch blade on the bandsaw doesn't turn all that easily. The one on the hacksaw is not that much better, I must admit, but I've got that roughly hacked out, so I need to neaten that up. So I think the next thing I'll do is probably add some material down here, build that up a little bit, and then I can come in and set this up on the rotary table and actually do some profiling. The slot turned out all right. There's a couple of dings there where the drill bit has wandered. I'm now set up to start carving out some radii. I've centered my rotary table. I've got my key center pop centered underneath that, and so I'm now just going to run a cut around, smooth that out. The piece of stuff I added, using weld, seems to have stuck them quite nicely, and then it's a matter of doing these two slots here. I've got this jacked up on a bit of plate just so that I don't cut into my rotary table. I think I should be right here with the slots. I might just nibble on the corner of that, but I'll control the depth, so that should be all right. I'm ready to do these 6mm wide slots at a radius 60. What I've done is I've drilled diameter 6 holes at each end of the slot. I've got my 4mm cutter, and I'm going to be just sort of lowering it in a millimetre or so at a time until I break through. And then, as I do with straight slots, I'll be offsetting it either side of that centre line until I get to that 6mm. It's a 2 flute slot cutting end mill, so I could plunge right in, but I'm always a little bit wary of doing that because the cutters deflect a little bit and you don't know whether you're going the wrong way. So there's the first slot done. So yes, running the cutter down, 1.2mm depth of cut to plunge through, and then offsetting 0.5 millimetre either side to bring it out to 6. It's actually, I think, 6.1 or something like that. Now on with the next one. One thing I will mention, when doing this, I find that it's useful to use one of the rotary table clamps to provide a bit of drag on your table. If you don't have that on there, you'll feel every little twitch in the table. If you have that on there, it just smooths it out a little bit, makes it a little bit easier to see where you're going, control it, and feel comfortable with it. So you have to be careful you don't put too much on, but yeah, just a little bit of pressure there does help. For those of you who are thinking it would have been nice to do these radii before I cut the slots, one way around that is I've put a bit of masking tape there. I've marked out the centre using the original drawing, and now I've just lined up on that the pencil cross. I'll take that off before I machine it, but that's one way of getting that centre back again. Another way would be to wedge a piece of wood or other material in there that will give you something you can mark a centre on. And here's the almost finished product. I have a couple of holes to put here. The important thing about those is that they're the correct distance down from here. This way doesn't matter as much, but I've still got the scribe line there that I've filed to, so I can use that to step off, and from here it doesn't matter quite so much. The other thing that I'm missing, and I alluded to in the title slide, was there's meant to be a score mark across here. And what I'm going to have to do there is put a plate behind, refine that centre, which once again, because I've got marking out lines from other things, shouldn't be too difficult. So I can put that score. That score is actually to show you 120 degrees or 118 if you want to be particular about it. And I'll probably also put one at 135 just for completeness sake. And that's because that's the standard drill sharpening angles. They're actually half the angle because in its uppermost position, that's horizontal, and at its lowermost position, that's at 45 degrees. So these are half angles, but there's a mark on the corresponding part this bolts to, and so that gives you sort of a rough idea as to where you have to line up for. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope this has been useful to you, and we'll see you for the next one.